Right. Well, good morning, dear ones. We are SOTU, and this is SOTUesday for the first day of November, 2016. Boy, you've had some secrets revealed lately, haven't you? But we would like to speak to you of a dynamic that is, what shall we say, an adjunct to what we spoke of last week about the crises that are happening, the crises that are happening, as well as the dynamic of the crossroads and the are you sure that you are facing as a species. We also alluded recently to the dynamics that this is basically a reflection of the battle of the sexes, and therefore goes back to a very primal dynamic in the movement of earthly humanity, and that was the dynamic of the emotional movement from the childhood of your species, when you had a collective consciousness, into your adolescence, where you had begun to, and after a 250,000 years or so, have achieved a certain dynamic of I am, a certain dynamic of identity, a certain dynamic of understanding of who you are. Now, you must understand that this has been an unconscious movement, an unconscious dynamic until recently. And what you are being asked from a spiritual perspective, what you are being asked is to begin to be able to step back from your dynamic and read the reflections for what they really are, and read the reflections for what they are saying to you. And if you answer those reflections, you will create a reality for yourself that is considerably better than if you allow yourselves to be deluded down the path of roses, which is really not going to lead to roses, which is going to lead to a dynamic of your reality forcing you into the movement of change rather than you taking this step voluntarily. So as each of you begins to understand what the movement is, and it is different for what it is the same for the entirety of humanity, but you must also be able to transcend the understanding of gender, the understanding of the dynamic of those incarnated in a masculine body. Not all, because there are so many of you being born with a dynamic of androgyny, which is a dynamic of a new movement forward in earthly humanity and understanding who it is that you are going to become. As you begin to be able to feel free enough to explore these dynamics without judgments, then you are able to begin to move and soften the parameters of what you believe. And so, in the dynamics of the reflection of your reality, what you have right now in America, in the United States, as going to be reflected throughout the dynamic of the entire world, you have a dynamic of two throwbacks. You have a representation of the patriarchal masculine, and you have a representation of the matriarchal feminine, and neither of them, in the dynamic of their focus, in the dynamic of the reflections that are coming out around them, we would suggest you is suitable for a dynamic of a humanity moving forward, other than each one of them in their own way will hasten the journey toward reset. So you must understand that. Not that reset is that far off, dear ones. You need to understand that as well. And so as you understand that the reflection of your reality is basically, especially with the dynamics of these new charges of corruption, these new dynamics of this hidden reality of quote-unquote emails and the FBI and the Clinton Foundation and all of that, and all of the dynamics that have been around Trump the whole time and his whole thing. And you have a representation. Donald represents represents the patriarchal masculine with all of its pinching of bottoms and its blatant sexism. But again, he's a product of his environment, just as Hillary is a product of her environment. But the problem is that there has not been any, what shall we say, dynamic of role models enough where the feminine is the question ultimately is for you. Is the feminine going to take the long route to ruin that the masculine has? Are you going to go to the dynamic of a matriarchal feminine reality that basically says if you are of a feminine gender, or if you claim the dynamic of a feminine gender, then that makes you okay, that makes you better than? Or are you going to understand that each one of these individuals is very flawed? And so it doesn't really matter which direction is taken on next Tuesday when we will be speaking with you again. But the dynamic ultimately is, what's your response going to be afterwards? That is where the real resounding "who are you going to be" is going to come from. And you will have to decide that. And the answers are not apparent. And they are going to require each of you in your own way, especially you all that are locked in old belief systems, those of you that are motivated by anger at the masculine, those of you that are motivated by anger at the feminine, those of you that wish to blame anything except the dynamic of yourself. Dear ones, you need to understand this is the movement that you have chosen. This is that bridge to the 21st century, except it's not a bridge that any of you anticipated. It is a dynamic of your reality saying to you, who is it that you are going to be? Who is it? Those of you that are, what shall we say, in feminine bodies and tend to be more locked in the dynamic of that it doesn't really matter anything that Hillary has done, or said, or anything like that. The bottom line is that she is a woman, and she will therefore be better than any man, and especially a man that is as patriarchally apparent as Donald Trump is. And so, you have this whole dynamic of righteous anger that you are feeling within this dynamic. And yet, at the very same time, dear ones, as the sun comes shining through your reality, there will be other choices. We'll speak to you more next week about this dynamic. We wish to have you as emotionally prepared for it as possible. Understand that the movement is as natural as growth, as natural as the rising sun. And so until the next time we close, sending you peace, sending you happiness, sending you joy. We love you, dear ones.